Today, we are opening the door to a space that is, well, it's almost entirely shielded from the modern world.
We are. We're talking about a profound, ancient ritual practiced by a truly resilient people.
A ritual that survived war, exile, centuries of colonialism, only to face an existential crisis.
And one rooted entirely in, of all things, modern pharmacology.
We are conducting a deep dive into one of the most enigmatic, sacred, and fiercely private locations on Earth.
The Tower of Silence, or Dakhma, nestled right in the heart of Mumbai.
Just try to imagine this scene for a moment. You have this 55-acre dense forest enclave, the Dungar Wadi,
Right.
surviving in the absolute center of one of the world's most populous, most frenetic cities.
It's a pristine green space that's completely protected by the Parsi community. It feels out of time.
And at its core stands the Dakhma, a circular, raised, open-air structure.
Built by Zoroastrians for a very specific purpose: excarnation, the ritual exposure of corpses to the elements.
So our mission here is to gain really privileged access to the profound theological thinking behind this ancient custom.
And to trace the unique history of the Parsis who carried this tradition all the way to India.
Then we have to analyze the totally unexpected, almost unbelievable modern crisis that is now threatening its very existence.
Yeah, we need to understand not just the mechanics of the ritual, but the deep faith that sustains it.
And what makes this all so tragic is that from the very beginning, this was framed as a commitment to the ecosystem.
It was. In the Parsi tradition, this excarnation is seen as the deceased person's final, immediate act of charity.
Providing nourishment directly back to nature through the scavenger birds.
It's a system built on a kind of perfect ecological harmony.
To really grasp the sanctity of the Dakhma, we have to go deep into Zoroastrian theology.
We do. The entire ritual hinges on one core principle: maintaining the purity of the three sacred elements,
Which are earth,
Zam,
Appas,
and fire. They are seen as divine creations, and so pollution must be strictly avoided.
Okay, but if pollution is the core issue, how could any disposal method avoid polluting something? Why is the sky the only safe option?
Because of the corpse demon.
The corpse demon.
Yes. The central belief is that the moment death occurs, the body is instantly invaded by this demon, Nasu.
Instantly.
And this influx makes the body ritually unclean, Nasu, and is ready to contaminate everything it touches.
So that would violate the divine purity of the elements.
Precisely.
Okay, so let's unpack that. If burial pollutes the sacred earth and cremation pollutes the sacred fire,
And placing the body in the ocean would pollute the sacred water.
then those actions are just. They're forbidden.
Exactly. The strict ecclesiastical code, specifically the Veto of Dad, which translates roughly as given against the demons, it requires a solution that precludes the pollution of all three.
And that solution is placing the bodies under the open sky.
To be consumed by scavenger birds. It's a radical, almost clinical approach to environmental preservation and spiritual purity that dates back millennia.
It's so old, in fact, that the Greek historian Herodotus wrote about it.
He did. He attested to the Zoroastrian ritual exposure of the dead way back in the mid-5th century BCE.
But what's fascinating is he noted even then that these specific rites were kept highly secret.
They were not for public consumption. And that secrecy, it really speaks to the intense spiritual weight of the practice.
And while the ritual is ancient, the grand stone structures we call the Towers of Silence were a much later development.
A much later architectural necessity, yeah.
Yeah.
First documented in the early 9th century CE. But the rationale, that never changed: prevent the dead body from contaminating the living world.
That theological solution requires an incredible architectural response. When you look at the towers,
Which were nicknamed by the British, by the way.
right, they function as these self-contained open-air machines for decomposition.
They're stone-built, circular, and completely roofless, often spanning up to 100 feet wide.
Almost like a kind of stone amphitheater, but open to the sky.
Exactly. And eternal geography is meticulous. The whole surface is divided into 3 concentric rings like steps.
And this segregation, it's not arbitrary. It reinforces the purity standards even in death.
Not at all. The outermost, largest ring is reserved for male bodies, the middle ring for female bodies.
And the innermost part is strictly for children.
Right. So once the carrion birds, the vultures, perform their sacred function and consume the flesh, the sun and wind complete the process.
Bleaching the skeletal remains.
And this whole cycle, depending on the season, it can take up to a year.
At which point, the specialist pallbearers, the Nusalers, collect the dried bones.
And they move them to the central ossuary pit, the Bandar.
And there, they disintegrate further with the help of lime.
And this is key. The remaining fluid runoff doesn't touch the sacred earth directly. It seeps through these deep layers of coal and sand filters designed to purify it.
So it's a closed, self-contained, and remarkably efficient system that really honors the environment.
It is.
Now, let's connect this ancient Persian ritual to its improbable location in the middle of modern Mumbai.
The Parsis are the direct descendants of ancient Persians who fled persecution.
Right, following the rise of the Islamic Empire in the 7th century.
They eventually sought refuge in Western India. They were refugees who displayed this incredible entrepreneurial spirit.
Over centuries, they became tremendously prosperous traders, shipbuilders, eventually industrialists.
And they moved to Bombay in the 1600s, drawn by incentives to turn these swampy islands into a trading powerhouse.
So as the community grew, they needed a place to perform their final rites, which were so different from the local traditions.
So different from Hindu or Muslim traditions, yeah.
So in 1672, the English governor, a man named Gerald Ongier, officially designated a tract of land at Malabar Hill.
He did. He set it aside for the community to establish their consecrated ground.
And this designation cemented the essential boundary, the boundary of privacy and sanctity.
Only the special class of pallbearers, the Nusasalers, are permitted to enter that sacred precinct. For centuries, the rituals were performed without interference
Shielded by the forest.
and by the sacred vows of the community.
The intensity of that privacy was almost impossible for outsiders to grasp, even under colonial law.
You see this so vividly in a 1792 incident where a European resident actually managed to climb the wall and peer inside the tower.
The community outrage was immediate.
And fierce. They were so offended by this act of desecration that the governor, Sir Robert Abercrombie, had to issue a sweeping proclamation against it.
He suspended the person responsible.
They fiercely protected their sanctity from outsiders, from colonizers,
Yeah.
never suspecting the real existential threat would come from inside a cattle herd.
For centuries, the ritual Dakhma, it was a seamless, uninterrupted cycle.
It survived everything ancient history could throw at it.
But this seamless cycle began to unravel, and rapidly, in the 1980s and 90s.
And it was due to a completely unforeseen modern threat that attacked the most vulnerable part of the chain.
The vultures.
The vultures. Suddenly, they just began to disappear in catastrophic numbers.
And they had been incredibly common. Some estimates suggest there were once maybe 40 million vultures across the subcontinent.
Oh, absolutely. They were a fixture of the landscape. They were even considered a hazard around airports, but their populations just started collapsing.
And the reason wasn't habitat loss or some new virus.
No. By 2003, scientists made a truly shocking discovery. The birds were dying of kidney failure caused by a single pharmaceutical agent, diclofenac. And what's just fascinating here is the sheer devastating irony of it all.
It's a cheap veterinary painkiller.
That's all it is. Essentially ibuprofen for livestock.
Right.
Used widely on cattle starting in the early 90s.
And because India's cattle are often left to die naturally in fields, the vultures were consuming the contaminated carcasses.
Right, and these are birds with powerful stomach acids that can neutralize things like anthrax and tuberculosis.
But they couldn't handle this. So we're talking about a drug intended to relieve pain in cattle, Tylenol for cows.
And it wiped out over 97% of the region's main vulture species.
That is the definition of an unintended consequence.
The veterinary drug was eventually banned in 2006, but the damage was done.
And this is where the deep dive reveals a darker complication. Even though diclofenac was banned, the threat isn't over.
Not at all. You need to know that other similar toxic anti-inflammatory drugs, we're talking about things like aceclofenac, ketoprofen, they were readily available alternatives.
So they continue to circulate in the supply chain today.
Which means any captive breeding idea is still incredibly risky.
And the immediate impact in Mumbai was just horrific.
Yeah.
And intensely visible.
The Nusasalers would carry bodies up to the towers, expecting the vultures to have done their work.
Only to find the bodies from the day before and the day before that still untouched.
The slow decomposition led to intense smell and visibility problems.
This was made exponentially worse by the massive urbanization around the site, these new, wealthy high-rise apartment buildings.
They'd sprung up, overlooking the once secluded forest. And these new residents, they didn't see a profound religious custom.
They saw a severe aesthetic nuisance.
Exactly.
This triggered a profound and very public confrontation within the Parsi community itself.
The emotional turmoil, it really came to a head in 2005 when a community member, Den Bayaria, who had lost her mother.
She disseminated photos showing bodies that had been rotting for months.
These awful images, showing bodies in various stages of decay, they forced the Parsi leadership to face this catastrophic reality.
The tradition, as practiced, was failing the deceased.
In the complete and sudden absence of the natural mechanism, the vultures, the Bombay Parsi Panchayat, the community's leadership,
they were forced to search for modern, non-polluting solutions that would still adhere to the ancient religious rules.
They tried everything, masking the smell with flowers, using herbs and chemicals, but nothing could speed up decomposition.
Outside suggestions poured in, representing the state-of-the-art in funerary science.
And this is where the theological constraints really come back into play. People suggested high-heat gasification,
which vaporizes the body,
and a Swedish method called premession, which uses liquid nitrogen to freeze and shatter the body.
But consensus was impossible.
Impossible, because both solutions violated the core theology. Gasification was seen as being far too close to cremation, polluting the sacred fire.
And premession, while it freezes the body, relies on liquid nitrogen, a liquid which risks polluting the sacred water.
Nothing was as theologically pure or as efficient as the vultures.
Eventually, the community settled on a non-polluting mechanical solution: the installation of large solar concentrators.
Essentially, immense parabolic mirrors.
Designed to speed up decomposition through intense dehydration, using the sun as a catalyst.
This was adopted as the best alternative because it technically avoided direct contact with fire, water, or earth.
But it was immediately controversial. Some critics within the community bitterly called it backdoor cremation.
And crucially, it only works efficiently during Mumbai's clear, dry weather. During the monsoon season, decomposition slows right back down.
They also heavily debated turning the towers into a giant protected aviary,
A captive breeding program to protect vultures from the toxic drug environment.
But again, the core problem of contamination blocked the plan.
If a Parsi person died with diclofenac, or one of those other toxic drugs in their system, the already endangered captive vulture population would simply be poisoned.
The risks were just deemed too high.
Meanwhile, the urbanization challenge is just tightening the noose around this ancient space.
It's not just the lack of vultures anymore.
No. Those massive, tall apartment buildings surrounding the Dungarwadi are casting these long shadows,
literally blocking the sun's rays needed for the solar concentrators to work,
making that hard-won compromise even less effective.
The stark reality of the crisis has forced a major internal reckoning. Unable to use the towers, some Parsis have established private cemeteries or even resorted to cremation.
A Parsi crematorium was officially established in Mumbai in 2015.
And this shift has intensified a whole other debate on who has the right to use the sacred towers at all.
Especially concerning the offspring of mixed marriages, adding social tension to this environmental crisis.
And here is the ultimate crucial concern for the future of the faith.
If the traditional use of the Dakhma declines to the point of disuse,
then the sacred Dungarwadi land, which has been fiercely protected for centuries against countless attempts to seize it,
it might eventually be deemed obsolete and lost entirely to encroaching urban development.
The fate of the land is inextricably tied to the continuity of the rite.
It is.
So we arrive at this profound paradox: an ancient, ecologically conscious ritual,
specifically designed by an ancient faith to maintain the purity of nature,
has been completely dismantled, not by war or external assault, but by the entirely unintended consequences of a single modern drug used on cattle.
The system survived war, persecution, and exile, but it could not survive a pharmaceutical supply chain issue that disrupted the foundational biology of the ecosystem.
This deep dive really reveals how the fate of a religious identity and its core practices has become inextricably tied to the health of an entire ecosystem.
And to global policy decisions on veterinary medicine.
The Parsi tradition saw the disposal of the body as a final, immediate act of charity to the environment, feeding life back into the cycle.
Given the massive unintended destruction caused by our own medicine, it makes you wonder, what silent ecological costs are built into our own modern funerary practices?
The search for purity is still ongoing, and sometimes the biggest threat is hiding in the things we use every single day.